Headcanon, The Avengers and Puppies by Sci-Fi Girl 47. Anonymous asked, random question. Which of the Avengers do you think would be most likely to bring home a box of orphan puppies? And what hilarity would ensue? The amusing thing to me is that you'd think any one of the Avengers would be able to resist a box of puppies. So let's just go with the assumption that a single Avenger comes across a box of abandoned puppies labeled free. This is in no way happening, but it's a fun character study. Steve would just show up at the tower with them, a little embarrassed but resolute. I couldn't just leave them, Tony. It was cold and it looked like rain. He'd then spend the rest of the week arranging vet appointments, potty training, collars and vaccinations, arranging beds, and carefully screening prospective adoptive parents. And he'd keep the runt, the littlest one with the health problems that seemed scared all the time. Bruce wouldn't take the risk of bringing them home on his own. Carrying a box of hyperactive puppies would stress him out, so he'd ask Steve to come help him bring them home. Once they were there, he'd hover and do all the planning and very carefully keep away from them. Every once in a while, when they were asleep, he'd take the risk of rubbing a warm little round tummy, just to feel the soft fuzz and make the pup kick in his sleep. He'd quietly lobby to keep the quiet one, the one none of the adoptive families noticed. He'd be the one bringing home treats and presents and just standing by, hands tucked in his pockets, watching as the dog played with everyone, smiling to himself. It would take a while, probably a few years, before he'd let the dog sleep near him when he read or worked on his reports. Clint would bring them home and promptly disappear into his room with them. By the time anyone else figured it out, and here anyone else shall be read as Coulson, he'd have been emotionally invested in the damn things and have his hackles up about it. He'd keep the puppy that got along best with Mr. Fantastic and Coulson, but Coulson can be depended upon to control himself. Mr. Fantastic cannot. The puppy was fearless and calm and obedient. It would love Natasha best, but split its time evenly among the Avengers. Natasha would just walk in, deposit the box on the table, and say, Clint wouldn't let me leave the damn things. And the fact that Clint had not actually been with her at the time the dogs were acquired would not be anything anyone would want to bring up. If Natasha wanted to blame Clint, that was fine with everyone, especially Clint, who would already be on the floor with the puppies. Natasha would keep the smartest one and train her to be a brilliant and well-loved guard dog. She would obey only Natasha and show up in Clint and Coulson's bed far too often. Thor would be so excited by free dogs that they would have to sit him down and explain that there were a lot of abandoned pets in a major city. This would backfire because Thor would begin seeking out abandoned and rejected pets and bring them home. He would want to keep them all, and Tony would finally just give in and have the Maria Stark Foundation charter the Thor Odinson Animal Shelter for Noble Hearts. Thor would volunteer regularly and speak in moving and heart-rending words to every pet being adopted into a new home. Thor would not keep one for his own, but every abused, angry, or scared dog or cat that passed through the doors would be his for a while, and no one was sure if it was Allspeak or just Thor, but in the end, he could restore trust in even the most helpless cases. Tony would drive past them without a flinch, and then, an hour later, in the middle of a damn board meeting, he'd be so focused on the thought of the cardboard box full of helpless puppies that Pepper would have to send Happy out to find the damn things. He would then make a massive donation to a no-kill shelter and drop them all off on his way home, glad to be rid of it. And as he was walking out of the door, he'd hear one of the shelter employees making fun of the little hyperactive one, the one that wouldn't stay still and wouldn't stay in the box and wanted to play and eat and sleep all at once. She really was being affectionate about it, So it scared the ever-loving hell out of her when Tony stalked back to the counter. Behind the counter, collected the puppy in question, tucked it inside his astronomically expensive sport coat, and stalked out. Once back at the tower, he would slap the puppy down with far more care than he pretended to have, order Jarvis to have supplies delivered, turn on the rest of the room, and inform them of the dozens of places that thing was not allowed to be, including the workshop, his room, the kitchen, the common room, the rec room, the living room, and anywhere Tony was at a given time. Of course, the dog would end up sleeping with him the first night, and everything would be downhill from there. Steve would be very, very careful not to mention this. Coulson rescues dogs all the time. He doesn't want to talk about it, but he has a Rolodex of every SHIELD agent, law enforcement agent, government bureaucrat, underling, staffer, and intern that can be persuaded into keeping one. It's a pretty huge file. Headcanon, The Avengers and Puppies by Sci-Fi Girl 47.